there permit him to do that. I do not see that we've got Andy dialed in just yet.
Mr. Chairman, he is calling in. He needed the access, so I have sent that to him.
Okay, great. So he'll be going ahead and joining shortly. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, January 26, 2021, and this regularly scheduled meeting is taking place via WebEx, and the link to attend the meeting is available on the board's website. The meeting date, time, and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on January 19th, 2021. First thing, Karen, if you'd please go ahead and perform a roll call to confirm that we have a quorum.
Andy Bonner. I'm not sure if he's joined us yet.
He should be here in a couple minutes.
Thank you. Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Greg Gilbert.
Here.
John Griesbeck.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Here.
Gay Moon.
Here.
Judy Weatherby.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I think we have a quorum, so we will go ahead and proceed and be joined in progress by both Andy and hopefully a little bit later by Todd. The next item is for the statement of necessity to be read given the manner in which our meeting is taking place. And for that, I'll turn it over to Maria Bush from Legal.
Thank you, Kevin. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, which is taking place via teleconference on Tuesday, January 6, 2021. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website on January 19, 2021. If there is not a physical quorum present, the statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute pursuant to Cpa 844-108b2. If a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. As stated, this is the regularly scheduled quarterly meeting for the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to conduct the quarterly scheduled meeting of the board via teleconference due to COVID-19 in the most safe manner possible. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Our next order of business is an introduction here, and that is to Alex Martin. Alex is joining us as Assistant Commissioner. He's joined the Regulatory Boards Division here just recently. And Alex, the floor is yours to introduce yourself. And we're just very glad that you have joined us and look forward to working with you in the months and hopefully years to come here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I certainly appreciate the floor and appreciate that bit of introduction, and I really appreciate y'all's time and your service. So I'll just say a couple words about myself, then also wanted to make just a few brief remarks and won't take up much time at all. So I think I've had the pleasure of speaking with several of you in my former role, which was in the governor's office as Director of Appointments. And that was just a wonderful job because I got to work with such great folks from outside of government who are industry experts like yourself each and every day, who have a passion for service and who want to protect the public and also represent their industry in an honorable way. So pleasure to be here and to have spoken with those of you that have had the chance to on previous occasions. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm an 8th generation Tennessean and a native of Portland. If you're from Middle Tennessee, you might know where that is. East and West folks, you may not, but it's in Sumner County. So that's a little bit about me. I went to school at Tennessee Tech and was an econ and finance major. Didn't quite have the stomach for the accounting curriculum, but had a lot of friends who did, and certainly have the respect for the work that you all do. I know it's probably a busy time of year, or certainly about to be. So appreciate the work that you all do. I also wanted to just say how much we appreciate your endurance and your time during this period. I know it's certainly been difficult to attend meetings and to stay focused during this time. And so just really appreciate everyone's participation and your continued service to the state. I certainly look forward to working with this group. Appreciate your leadership. And I certainly hope that you will reach out to me anytime I can be helpful. And I have to say this, Wendy has been phenomenal. I have really enjoyed getting to work with her, and look forward to working with you all as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission members, for allowing me the opportunity to give just a brief introduction. And again, look forward to working with all of you.
Well, Alex, thank you. And we share your sentiments with respect to Wendy. We are really blessed with her in the role as executive director of this particular board, as well as with the other staff that work with her, that she leads. And then, Alex, one other comment I would just mention briefly. It was interesting, I guess it was earlier in 2020 when the Board of Accountancy was up for review with the Joint Legislative Committee with respect to our sunset provisions. And one of the items that was really a note of distinction for our board, for which I think we have you among others, and particularly the governor and his predecessor to thank, is that y'all have been very diligent in promptly filling open memberships on this particular board, which has allowed us to work at full strength, representing all three grand divisions, nearly, at least in my tenure, during the entire time of that tenure, almost without exception. And so appreciate your role in facilitating that, but certainly we pass on our thanks to our current governor and his predecessors in terms of doing that and making sure that we can represent both the public and the profession appropriately. So we look forward to working with you, Alex, and thank you very much for taking time to be with us this morning.
Yes, sir. Hey, thank you so much, and look forward to working with all of you. Appreciate it.
You bet. Take good care. Thank you. The next item that I have are just a few announcements. One is a reminder for all the board members that have not already done so to please complete your conflict of interest statements and get those submitted to Wendy by the end of this week. I know that several have done that. If you missed that email or are missing that, just let Wendy know, and she will get those a new fresh conflict of interest statement out to you, but we need to get that housekeeping matter done. And then the other thing that I would like to do is just from a housekeeping perspective, because of the way that we're conducting this meeting in a remote process and unfortunately not in person, is just to remind board members that if you're not speaking, please go ahead and mute your mic. Right now, the connections seem to be good, and so we'll keep the video open. If that becomes a problem and we're kind of losing bandwidth, we'll look to our host, Todd, to tell us that, and then we can close off our video to some degree to kind of give us the bandwidth that we need to continue on. And then if we get to a point where there are multiple people trying to input at once, I may ask that we just go ahead and use the chat function with respect to indicating that you want to speak, and make sure that you open that up so that everyone can see that. I will be able to see it, and then I'll just call on you basically in the order that I see it pop up. We may not need to do that if we don't have a lot of folks jumping in at once, but if we do, I'd like to go ahead and do that if we get to that point. Another announcement is that this call is going to be open to the public and will be available for replay probably in a matter of a couple of days. And we welcome any visitors or members of the public that are participating in this call. And at the conclusion of the meeting, when we get to the new and old business, if there is some public input that would like to be made, we will invite that at that time. As Maria already indicated, because of the manner in which we're meeting, all votes will be via roll call vote. So with those as announcements, we'll go ahead and start going through the meat of the agenda. The first action item that we typically do in January is to adopt Robert's Rules of Order as the rules under which we will conduct our business meetings. And so may I please have a motion for adoption of Robert's Rules of Order?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to this motion to adopt Robert's Rules of Order? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. The motion passes. The next item is review and adoption of the agenda for today's meeting. This has been presented to, it's been both public notice, but also presented to the board members in advance. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the agenda as presented? Not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. The next item that would be an action item is going to be the approval of the meeting minutes from our meeting of October 20, 2020. Just would note that I think earlier this morning, Wendy sent out a slightly revised set of minutes that includes a couple of corrections there. So that's the version that we should be working from. You should have received that via email earlier this morning. Has anyone not received that? Okay, so that'll be the minutes that we'll be approving. So at this point, I accept a motion to approve the minutes from the October 20, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion concerning the minutes from that meeting prior to our vote on approval or disapproval? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the executive director's report. And I know it will have at least one action item with respect to the new proposed meeting date in May of 2022. So once Wendy's completed that report, we'll go ahead and circle back and vote on that action item. Wendy, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You received the executive director's report with your materials midweek last week. And as Kevin mentioned, the future meeting dates are there at the beginning of the report. And then just some reminder on upcoming Nasba meetings. As Andy mentioned yesterday, and we'll probably talk more about today, the Nasba meetings, the executive director's meeting and the regional meetings are all going to be virtual. So mark those on your calendar and try to attend, preferably the Eastern Regional if you can. But if those dates don't work for you, I think that you would be able to attend the Western Regional as well. The content is the same for both of those.
Hey, we
So
I have a question on that.
sure.
I saw in the Nasba mail out that came, I think, yesterday, and Andy may be able to answer this. They said that for this year only, they were going to combine the East and West into one meeting.
Oh, okay.
So does that change the date of, I guess it would, but which one's changing, Andy? Do you know?
They have decided to merge the two meetings together for this one time and have a virtual meeting because it was just a repeat of both sessions. We had a conversation about that at the board meeting. The date now is unknown. They're going to get together and try to pick out a good date. So I don't know if they're going to pick the first one or the last one or in between. But we're just going to have one regional meeting. And as far as a virtual meeting is concerned, and then they should be sending out the dates pretty soon. The other meetings that are going to go virtual are the Board of Accountancy Legal Counsel Conference in April, the Executive Directors and Board Staffs Conference, and then also the new board meeting orientation for new board members is going to be virtual too. And a date has not been set on that one either. We've actually gone through the agendas and approved them. We're in the process of approving. We got a tentative agenda now, but more to come on that. As soon as I get it, I'll flip it to Wendy so that she can get it on everybody's calendar.
Okay, great. And we'll be looking for that new board orientation. I think John will be up for that this year. So we'll get those dates on his calendar. Thank you, Andy. So you can strike that part from my report. The next part of the report is the CPA exam update. This is the Board of Examiners meets with us to give us an update. I don't know if it's quarterly or twice a year, but they give us an update on what's going on at the Board of Examiners level. So I just kind of noted the highlights of that here in my Executive Director's report. I think a couple of you may have been able to attend this meeting, but some of the stats with the pandemic were interesting. 21,000 plus sections delivered in Q2. That's 43% of the amount delivered in the second quarter of 19. So down significantly there, obviously with test center closures in the month of April. 49,000 plus sections delivered in the third quarter of 2020. That's 87% of the third quarter of 19. They are forecasted to end 2020 18% down. So we had an 18% drop in the number of folks taking the exam in 2020, primarily due to the pandemic. As a result, they've been very active internationally with opening up some testing centers specifically to help the international folks that have had difficulty traveling. So they have launched testing in India, South Korea, Canada, Nepal, Egypt, and Jordan to help relieve some of that. The AICPA has extended their contract with Nasba for the exam until 2039. I believe they still need to work on the third-party Prometric contract in the next couple of years. I think it's 2024 for that one. Our understanding is that Prometric centers are open at full capacity, but many candidates are reluctant to return to the testing centers with the continued pandemic. Continuous testing started July 1st of 2020. 3,008 sections delivered to candidates retesting a failed section in the third quarter, with 1,588 of those test sections having a passing grade. So about 50% of those folks that returned were able to pass. And so that's exciting news for the continuous testing effort. At the recommendation of the State Board Committee, AICPA has created a clearinghouse type webpage for State Board staff and board members to obtain any information we'd like as a result related to the exam. And that includes PowerPoints, links, materials for us to deliver to students, those types of things that would be helpful to board and staff related to the exam. So it's a helpful page, and thank you to them for doing that. Attached to the director's report is the third quarter exam results for Tennessee, as well as the overall statistics. It has been noted that those folks who did decide to stay in the pipeline and continue to test, that the pass rate has gone up, and individuals have been more successful. So maybe their determination has been, or they've had more study time, I'm not sure, but that's been good on that front. Cpa Evolution, as you all probably know, those model rules were approved by Nasba and AICPA in the late fall. We are going to need to update our education rules, really because our accreditation, the accreditation aspect of our rules is out of date. So we really need to get that updated. So Marie and I are going to be working on that between now and the next meeting, and hope to have you some draft language to look at, and we can work from there. But we will also, as we look at that, look at some of the updates to the model rules related to CPA evolution, and see if we can incorporate some of those items as well, if they make sense in our particular rules. So we'll have a lot to talk about there at the May meeting. Newsletter, we were a little late in getting our fall newsletter out, but it was distributed December 21st via email. Access to all newsletters is available on our website. We have the current version on the homepage, and you can click through to look at any prior versions. Outreach has been limited with the pandemic. I did attend the November TSCPA Council meeting. I have a meeting with Katie Cheek at the Society, I believe next week. We'll talk about doing some efforts for students, doing some virtual presentations for students to give them the ins and outs of requirements for the exam, requirements for licensure, and then how to go through that process. We are also working within the department on coming up with some new and different ways of doing outreach, so more to come there. Renewals, I did mention yesterday that we were a little slow on renewals to start because we had some IT issues that are still lingering to date, but some of the bigger ones have been fixed. This all stemmed from an update to our licensing platform that occurred in the fall, and left us with a lot of unexpected issues to fix. So we did get our mailed notices out. I believe I said mid-November here, but as I go back, I believe it was the very end of November. And then we did some email reminders in the month of December. You'll see a couple of there. We did one on January 11th, and then we have one to plan to go out tomorrow. If these individuals have not renewed by January 30th, they will receive a $100 penalty and can renew up until June 30th with that penalty fee attached. You'll see the numbers there at the bottom of this page. We have 7,139 individuals who have renewed. We are ahead of last year with that number, so that's good news. So we still have 965 in expired grace versus 1,329 last year. So I feel better about our IT issues with those numbers. We are a little behind in the firm side. We're at 222 versus 135 last year. So for anyone paying attention, just make sure you get your licenses renewed by January 30th. New licenses issued on the next page. There's just a rundown there. Of course, we saw a decline in 2020, primarily due to the pandemic. We were able to issue a total of 595 individual licenses in the year 2020. That is a little behind the prior 2 years, but actually, if you go back to 2017, that's ahead of 2017, and that was a year that a new exam was launched, where the numbers typically dip when a new version of the exam is launched. So, and we did see an uptick there in firm permits. You know, I'm not sure if that's people who were laid off or had to change course in their careers and potentially are going to hang their shingle out there and try to make it a go on their own. Not sure totally, but we did see an uptick there. At the bottom is your overall licensing population as it stands when I created this report. And Mr. Chairman, I believe that completes the items included. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on the executive director's report or the items that she covered? We will have the one action item on approving the meeting date for May of 2022. But before that, any questions or comments with respect to Wendy's report? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take action on the future meeting date that is being proposed. That date for the board meeting is going to be Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. And of course, typically we would have our committee meetings that preceding Monday afternoon on Monday, May 2nd. But the date that we need to approve is the actual board meeting date. So is there a motion to approve that new date?
I make such a motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on that date. Is there any further discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is related to a reinstatement application. And typically for these, we have a 2-meeting protocol where there is a first meeting where the application or the reinstatement application is presented to the board. And we're primarily not making a final decision on reinstatement, but looking at whether or not the criteria in the reinstatement application have been met to proceed to a second meeting where the board will formally consider reinstatement. And we are in the second of 2 meetings now for this particular reinstatement application. And to kind of summarize the situation in terms of where we're at, I'll turn it over to Maria and legal counsel.
Thank you, Kevin. So as it was just mentioned, Mr. Fontenot has submitted a reinstatement application for the board's review. If you all recall, this was presented at the October meeting, and now it's been approved to where Mr. Fontenot is here. In order to answer any questions, I prepared a memorandum for you all outlining the details of his license revocation, and I'll just highlight some of those points that were outlined in the memo. And after that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and then we can open up the floor for the board members to question Mr. Fontenot. Can I just confirm, is Mr. Fontenot, are you on the line? I see a call-in user 2.
Yes, I am on the call.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Fontenot, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So he is seeking his CPA license reinstatement. Currently, his license is in revoked status. And we received his reinstatement application in August of this year. Of August 4th, 2020. And on October 20th, 2020, his application was evaluated by the board and approved for presentation at this meeting. Mr. Fontenot was originally licensed in October 1994. In 2014, he reported a matter to the board wherein he misappropriated funds in his role as treasurer of the board of directors of the Cookeville Lacrosse Club. A complaint was opened due to that incident, and an investigation occurred. In May 2014, the board imposed discipline against Mr. Fontenot, and the discipline included a civil penalty of $5,000, ethics course requirement, and suspension of his license for 5 years. And then from that point, the consent order provided for a payment plan And in the event that you default on a payment plan, your license is automatically revoked. So the original discipline was suspension. There was a default on the payment, and therefore the license was revoked. So the consent order also said if the license would be revoked, then automatically there would be an imposition of 5-year period where he could not request reinstatement. So that was February 11th, 2015. So 5 years from then would have been this last February of 2020. Subsequently, just to consider other complaints that occurred since the revocation in February 2015, a complaint was opened against Mr. Fontenot for holding out as a CPA with a revoked license. It appears that this complaint stemmed from online references to the CPA credential made before the revocation, and that this was something that appeared like in a Google search. It was related to his PTIN profile, and the disposition of this complaint, it was closed with a letter of warning. And where we are now is that Mr. Fontenot has satisfied his civil penalty payment, and he has submitted proof of completing the Tennessee state-specific ethics course. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Sorry, that was long-winded. I just wanted to give you a full picture of where we are. So today the board, like I said, can question Mr. Fontenot. I'm also happy to answer any questions, and the board has full discretion under our rules to approve the reinstatement, deny the reinstatement, or approve the reinstatement with certain stipulations on a license.
Thank you, Maria. For this process, given that it's likely that several board members will have questions either of Maria or of staff or of Mr. Fontenot, what I'd ask our board members to do is to go ahead and use the chat function and just say you have a question, and I'll just recognize those in the order that they come in. The way that I'd like to proceed with this first is to offer Mr. Fontenot the opportunity, if he should like, to make any statement that he should like with respect to his application for reinstatement. And we will take that, and then we will open it up for questions, and those may be put either to Mr. Fontenot, to legal counsel, or to staff. And so with that, Mr. Fontenot, if you have any statement that you would like to make with respect to your reinstatement application, you are welcome to do so at this time.
Thank you. Yes, yes, board. I took great pride in the fact that I was a CPA, and I truly, solemnly regret my actions of several years ago. I didn't intend to hurt anybody. I realize and appreciate now the magnitude of what I did, and I don't know what else to say other than I just would really like to have my license reinstated. I thoroughly enjoy the business of accountancy, and regret my actions, and will do whatever's necessary in the eyes of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fontenot. One other clarifying question before we begin with our general questions. Maria, last meeting in October, we had a second meeting on reinstatement that invoked for the first time, I guess what I would call the second chance types of provisions under state law. Note that those are not being invoked here in this particular case, and I wondered if you could elaborate as to why it is not necessary for the board to consider that aspect of things if they were to deny reinstatement.
Yes, Kevin. So in this instance, the Fresh Start Act is a statute that we have to abide by whenever a licensee receives, or an applicant receives, a felony conviction. And in this instance, there was no criminal conviction, and so the Fresh Start Act would not apply. Sorry, the Fresh Start Act appeal would not apply.
Thank you for clarifying that, Maria.
Yes.
So at this point, I would like to open the discussion up to any board members who have a question either directed to Mr. Fontenot or to legal or to staff, and kind of work through questions, and then we'll separately have an opportunity as a board to kind of deliberate, if you will, and make our inputs with respect to our views on reinstatement. So are there any questions that board members have with respect to this matter at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Maria and then also for Mr. Fontenot.
Yes, Larry.
Maria, you just now mentioned that there were no felony, it didn't involve felony charges. Is that because there were none pursued, or well, was this not?
From the information that I have, there were no criminal charges pursued in this matter. From what I understand, Mr. Fontenot repaid all of the money back, and he just self-reported this matter to the board. So there was no criminal information that we had available regarding this.
So, Mr. Fontenot, and I hope I pronounced that right, could you just give us a little short synopsis of what happened and your personal explanation of, I mean, a lot of times in situations like this, you hear people say, well, my intent was to pay it back. I was just borrowing it and I was going to get it back. And can you tell us what is different now that would prevent you from that happening again? Just kind of give us a little short
Well,
synopsis.
Sure. Your statement precisely the reason that I did advance the money temporarily. I would be short of funds at the end of the month. My wife's business was a preschool, and most of her receipts were early in the month. And basically, just borrowed money for a few days to get through the end of the month until she received the bulk of her revenue at the beginning of the next month. As far as why this would never happen again, this has been on my mind constantly for the last 5 years. I worked hard to gain my licensure as a CPA. I took great pride in it, and there is nothing that would cause this to ever enter my mind would ever happen again. I don't know what else how else I could state it other than I truly regret my actions, and it's just something that will never happen again. I just put it plain and simple.
So this was a series of borrowings, kind of like a line of credit. That, I mean, is that basically what you were doing? Was it more than one? There was more than one occurrence. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It was a few. It was maybe 4 or 5 times, and it was basically just short of funds, and I had them available. It was. I could have gone to the bank, arranged for a line of credit, but this was. It was there. It was easier. I didn't mean to do any harm. I realize now that it was just a terrible decision. Like was stated, it was all paid back, and self-reported myself because I realized then what I had done, and I truly regret it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other questions, either for Mr. Fontenot or legal or staff?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff. I'm not clear where Mr. Fontenot stands on CPE. Karen touched on that a little bit in the email of August of 2020. Speaks of a record of CPE compliance in FileNet, but maybe I probably overlooked something that gave us a status on CPE.
Because my license had been revoked, I have not been doing my CPE for those years. I didn't realize that was necessary or an option due to the fact that my license has been revoked. I will fulfill any requirements the board sees fit immediately, even though it is tax season.
Maria,
So while
do you,
the status, oh, sorry.
no, I just didn't know if you wanted me to handle this, Maria, or if you wanted to.
You can speak to it, Wendy. I will say just real quick, it's something Wendy and I have talked about. We do recommend on reinstatement for people who have been in revoked status that they submit the 80 hours of CPE within the 24-month preceding 40 technical and then the 2-hour state specific. But in this case, the consent order only required him to do the state specific ethics course. He probably would have to do it again just because of the timeline. But when you're in revoked status, typically you don't do the CPE. I believe in suspended status, you do maintain, but when the license is revoked, there's no requirement to maintain CPE.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think, Mr. Fontenot, you could have done CPA. I don't think you have to have a license to sit for CPE, but that's fine. I was just not sure what your status was with respect to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, did you have any additional elaboration on the CPE status?
I think they covered it. We do not, as part of the reinstatement application on a revoked license, we don't require them to submit CPE with the application. And we allow the board to make that decision as they determine reinstatement or not. I think Maria recommends it in the document that if you choose to reinstate, that you do it provided that he complete the 80 hours or upon completion of the 80 hours of CPE that he would be required to do for any type of renewal.
Thank you, Wendy. Other board member questions, either for staff, legal, or for Mr. Fontenot?
I have a question, Kevin, for Mr. Fontenot. Your employment status, have you maintained the same employment status throughout all of this, or have you had to make some changes before and after?
Employment status meaning?
What have you been doing, and have you had the same employer?
No, I've had, actually I've worked under the direct supervision of three CPAs during that time period, as well as a couple of stints at Amazon, just to put food on the table.
Are you currently employed by a CPA firm? You mentioned tax season, so are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gay. Any other board member questions for staff or Mr. Fontenot? Wendy, I see you.
I have a quick question on the license was ultimately revoked for non-payment of the civil penalty as outlined in the payment plan. I know there wasn't a significant delay, but and I'm not sure that has been spoken to. Mr. Fontenot, can you speak to any reason why there was a delay there with the payment plan?
That was several years ago. Shortage of funds, really just unsure of my future, actually. Once I got my head back square where it needed to be, I started making the payments again. But no, there wasn't any real reason other than just lack of funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Any other board member questions? Okay, hearing none at this point, what I'd like to do is open up to the board for any comments or deliberations, if you will, with respect to positions on reinstatement, and if favorable, any conditions that should be imposed, for example, CPE conditions with respect to reinstatement. I would say, and I just would verify this with Maria, it does appear that with respect to the actual order for reinstatement and the criteria for reinstatement, would it be fair to describe that as the position of the staff is that the reinstatement criteria that were outlined have been met by Mr. Fontenot at this time?
Yes, so the requirements in the consent order that were set forth that were conditioned prior to him requesting reinstatement with the board, those have all been satisfied. So the civil penalty and the ethics course, that has been satisfied.
Okay, thank you, Maria, for that clarification. Now just would welcome any comments or deliberations that individual board members have.
Maria, if someone were to make a motion to reinstate the license, does it have to include in the motion that he would be required to complete the 80 hours of CPE, or is that just assumed? And if so, does that 80 hours include ethics?
So I recommend that you all do include the requirement to do the 80 hours of CPE. It's not implied, so I would recommend that in the motion. And because I think the ethics course was received, trying to think, it was a couple of years ago. I need to double check that. So if you all would like him to do that again, that's fine. Or, you know, it's up to the discretion of the board if you don't want to include the the ethics course, since he previously completed that as a requirement of the consent order.
To confirm, the ethics course was taken in 2015.
Thank you, Wendy.
Okay. Based on that, then, are you open to a motion at this time, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we reinstate the license subject to completion of the 80 hours of CPE, which would include 2 hours of Tennessee-specific ethics training.
Thank you, Larry. And just to clarify, thank you, Judy. But to clarify the motion, I think the intent behind the 80 hours was basically to meet the Tennessee requirements that we would expect from a renewal. So of that 80, I think 40 would need to be technical hours of training. And then I believe you also mentioned including the state-specific ethics requirement, which could be a part of that 80 hours. Is just to clarify, are you comfortable with that kind of clarification, Larry and Judy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second with respect to Mr. Fontenot's reinstatement subject to those CPE conditions. Is there any further discussion or question?
I have a question. This 80 hours, is this going to count towards his CPE that would be expected for the 2021 year if his license is renewed? And I mean, or is this penalty CPE? Does that make sense?
It would normally not be considered penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I have one question. Is there a time limit on getting the 80 hours typically, Wendy?
I think you could set that because the way I'm hearing it and the way we would normally do it is we would not move him to active status until he provided us with that 80 hours. And so if you want to set a time period by which he should complete that, then I think you could do that unless Maria feels differently.
Okay, thank you. Larry, what do you think the time limit should be? Your motion.
Is June 30 reasonable? I mean, given that we're in January, well, basically we're almost in February. What would that be? 90 days? A little bit more than 90 days? February, March. No, it'd be, I mean, if we weren't in February, I would say a shorter period, but I think we should give him at least 90 days. But if he wants to complete it sooner than that, he's certainly welcome to do that.
Okay, I'm good with that. I do know it's right in tax season, and I would imagine that, but if you all feel that 90 days is reasonable, then
I would propose 6:30. I think that's fair with everything going on.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion. But,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So as a friendly amendment, are you comfortable with including a June 30, 2021 deadline for submission?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Fontenot, is that something that you believe you could comply with?
Yes, definitely.
So just to recap, the motion is to reinstate, subject to the completion of the CPE requirements that have been outlined, 80 total hours, of which 40 needs to be technical, and which needs to include the 2-hour Tennessee state-specific ethics CPE, to be completed by June 30 of 2021. So that's the motion that we have on the table as clarified. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion before the board?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
I
Okay, thank you, Karen. That motion passes. And Mr. Fontenot, just a couple of comments. I think one of the reasons for the outcome of reinstatement that we have here is that this began with you self-reporting to the board the violation. In some cases, that does not happen. And so we commend you for that self-reporting. We commend you for your diligence in seeking reinstatement and encourage the completion of that CPE in a timely manner. And we appreciate the time that you took both today to appear before the board and respond to questions. And then also at the October meeting, I believe you were also in attendance, even though the case was not adjudicated in final form until today's meeting. So we appreciate that attendance as well, and wish you well as you move toward reinstatement and hopefully a productive practice.
Thank you all very, very much. That is, I'm just overjoyed and, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fontenot, and best of luck as you move back into the profession. So also best of luck as you go through busy season this winter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board.
Thank you. I'm showing it's about 9:30. Would folks like to take maybe a 5-minute break or so before we proceed into the committee reports? And then we'll move on through the rest of the agenda. Folks, let's maybe reconvene at about 9:35 or so and take a coffee break. And please keep your lines open, but maybe stop your video and mute your audio, and then we'll reconvene at 9:35. And thank you for coming back so promptly after that break. I also see, Todd, that we have you with us in attendance. So thank you for sharing your time and expertise, not only with the Unified Command Task Force, but also with us. So we appreciate you joining us, Todd. Thanks.
Good morning. Sorry to be late, but thank you for your understanding.
Well, we very much understand, and thank you for your service in that capacity. Let me just eyeball things to make sure we've got all of our folks back here. I believe that we do. So we will go ahead and proceed into our board committee reports. And Gay, yesterday afternoon, you really led a committee through a lot. And so we appreciate the productivity and the patience and your leadership with respect to all of the items that you had before you. And I'll open the floor up to you for presenting the results of the committee meetings for the licensing committee from yesterday afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Fortunately, we had a very good discussion and it included all of the board. So we just have 5 items to recommend to the board this morning. So hopefully it will go pretty quickly. The first item on our recommendations is we recommend that the board all CPA exam credits expiring between December 31, 2020 and September 29th of 2021 would be extended through September 30 of 2021. That was our first recommendation.
Thank you, Gay. And I guess let's go ahead and just deal with each of those 5 recommendations in turn. And so at this point, would ask for a motion on that recommendation. And if we have a motion in a second, then we'll open up the discussion on it.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Larry. We have a motion to approve that recommendation. And was there a second?
Yes.
Second from Judy. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and we'll open up the floor for discussion on the motion.
Gay, I have lots of questions to go through here. I'm just kidding. I'm good.
Bring it on, Todd. Bring it on.
Any other comments or discussions? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Ray Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. The motion passes. Given the passage of that motion, Wendy, just a kind of a logistical question here. Will we be developing a plan to make sure that we promulgate that action out to the licensees and members here in Tennessee?
Mr. Chairman, the process is we'll go through Nasba. So I will advise them of the board's decision. They do have to manually update all of that information in their systems. So that will take a little bit of time. And then they will typically send the notice out to the licensees. So I will work with them on communicating.
Okay, appreciate that, Wendy. Thank you.
I will also reach out directly to the folks that asked for extensions. So they may receive two notices, but I will personally reach out to each of them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wendy. Gay, back to you.
Okay, the second item that the committee recommended to the board was for one specific candidate. This is Ms. Sarah Al-Ghamdi. She is a Saudi Arabia citizen, and we recommend to the board that we extend her CPA exam credits through December 31st, 2021.
So
Thank
moved.
you. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or comment on this motion for the extension through December of 2021 for this candidate? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Gay?
Okay, the third item on our agenda was, we recommend to the board that the exam for the FINRA Series 52 Municipal Securities Representative Qualification be approved for CPE credit as a technical field of study.
Thank you. Gay, is there a motion to that effect?
I so move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes as well. And Gay, we'll turn it back to you.
The fourth item, the committee recommends to the board that we deny the use of the name National Dental Accounting pursuant to Rule 0020-03-.15(3)
Thank you, Gay. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make such a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. I think I heard two motions, but will the person who was the second so moved be a second?
Yes, the second.
All right, great. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to deny the use of the firm name National Dental Accounting. Is there any further discussion or comment on the motion before the floor? If not, Gay, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Judy. That motion also passes. And Gay, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, the last item that the committee had to recommend to the board is the approval of the Southern Indiana Course 465, which is Accounting, Ethics, and Compliance. We recommend that it's approved as an accounting course for the purpose of qualifying for sitting for the CPA exam.
Thank you, Gay. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or comment on this one? If not, Karen, would you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes as well. Gay, are there any other items to report out from the licensing committee?
That is all the licensing committee has to report. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gay, and thanks also to the members of the licensing committee and the board. One thing just for those that may be either tuning in live to this meeting or will be viewing a replay of it when it's available online. Although these motions may seem to have proceeded rather rapidly this morning, they were the product of literally more than 1 hour and probably closer to 2 hours of discussion in our committee meetings, which are also publicly accessible yesterday afternoon. And so we appreciate the deliberations and the time that the committee and ultimately the board took both then and now. Next item on our agenda is the Enforcement Committee report out, and I'll turn that over to Chairman of that committee, Andy Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you just said, I want to state that the Enforcement Committee met yesterday. We went through each one of the cases and discussed them. That is open to the public. It definitely took a while to go through it. Today, we have a synopsis of 3 different kind of levels. One with the consent agenda, for which we had 7 cases. One that we have proposed discipline of 4, and then re-representations of 2. And so we'll use that summary consent or that summary synopsis report to go through each one of these legal cases. And just that is recorded yesterday so that the public would have the opportunity to go back and to listen to those in detail as we went through them. We've got 7 cases here under the consent agenda that we want to, that the committee recommended for approval. We have 2 that deal with holding out as a licensee. We have one with a breach of fiduciary duty, one with a discipline from another professional body, one with a fee dispute, a CPA or CPE deficiency, and also one with self-reporting litigation. And that one is number 7. We actually changed the committee did the recommendation on it to close with a letter of instruction via certified mail. And with that, I would give to you, Mr. Chairman, the first 7 cases as on our synopsis report for approval.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Is there a motion to that effect to approve the recommended disciplinary outcomes for the 7 cases?
Motion.
Consent agenda. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, Karen, will you call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes, and Andy, we'll turn it back over to you.
All right, under our second part, we had 4 cases that we had proposed discipline on, and I'll go through very quickly on each one of those. Case number 8 was holding out as a licensee. We concurred with a $1,000 civil penalty, and respondent stated that was a certified public accountant and tax engagement agreement. So this is far worse than what we had seen under the consent above. number 9. Case number 9 was unlicensed activity, $1,000 civil penalty. Respondent submitted report without an active firm permit. Case number 10 was holding out as a licensee, $1,000 civil penalty, using the word accounting in business name without licensure. And case number 11, unlicensed activity, peer review violation, independence violation. We did a $1,750 civil penalty on it, and respondent issued a report without an active firm permit or an enrollment in peer review. Respondent is employee of the client referenced in the review report. So I would submit those, Mr. Chairman, for approval from the board.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on one of those.
Okay, Larry, could I just ask that we go ahead and have a motion in a second, and then we'll
Sure.
open it up for discussion? Okay.
Sure, that's fine.
So is there a motion to approve the recommended disciplinary recommendations with respect to cases 8 through 11?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second, and Larry, just turn the floor over to you here for your questions.
Just real quick, on number 11, I want to touch back on that one just for a second. If you remember in the committee meeting yesterday, we talked about we made one change about changing the civil penalty to $1,000 and so forth. But up in the body of the complaint, up in the body of the explanation in the legal report, you know, before yesterday, we were talking about the fact that the penalty was a little bit lower because of some mitigating factors, and we discussed those. But we're still saying in there, if you go down to the second to the last paragraph, it says it should be noted that the respondent, go to the last paragraph. It says another area of consideration is that the respondent has only been licensed as a CPA since September 17th. And that almost sounds like we're saying, you know, this guy, I'm going to practice in 3 years, so let's give him a break or whatever. I would propose, I mean, to say that he's only been licensed 3 years or 4 or whatever it is now, almost sounds like an excuse. I mean, this guy was doing, or this person was doing reviews for 7 years with a CPA firm, and he claims he wasn't familiar with the administrative task. I mean, if you're doing a review and you're filling out the programs and you're filling out the independence questionnaire each year that the firm provides, you're hearing all that. It's not an administrative function. It's a professional requirement. So could I propose that we remove the wording that says another area of consideration is that, and then take out the word only been licensed since September of 17. So that paragraph will just say the respondent has been licensed as a CPA since September 17. And I'd like to make one.
Oh, sorry. This is Maria. I just want to let you know I'm here. My video is down, but I'm listening, and I can make a note to change that in the final report.
Okay, and then one other suggestion. Can we require, since he has not had state-specific ethics and won't for another year, can we require as part of this decision that he take an ethics course? And I don't care if it's Tennessee specific or not, but he needs some ethics training. I mean, a person who is doing 7 years of work in a public accounting firm and doesn't know that you don't do a review on your own employer, there's some training there that needs to be held. And, you know, our job, one of our most important jobs is to protect the public. And so in this case, we need to make sure that he understands ethics better than what he does right now.
I do have one comment to that, Larry. When I spoke with him, he said he had just taken the state-specific ethics course as a result of his renewal this time period. So he has had state-specific ethics at this point. So we might want to take that into consideration, but that doesn't mean we couldn't request maybe like a Nasba ethics course or something, but I did want to make sure the board was aware that he has since taken state-specific ethics.
Well, this is his first renewal was in December 19, so he wouldn't, that sounds like he wouldn't have another renewal until 21.
He may have just been working on his CPE for that 2-year period, but he had made a comment to me that he had just taken the TS CPA on demand course, and he said, "Gosh, I see everything in here that you guys mentioned." I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
Okay.
Larry, instead of ethics, how about a SARS course?
Yeah, yeah. I thought of that, Greg, and I think that's a good comment because the SARS course would be specific to the area that he was actually working in as a review. But I just think there's some more training. I don't know how you work 7 years in a public accounting firm and not know not to do what he did. And the wording down there just sounds like we're kind of making an excuse. So Maria, that's my suggestion. I think everybody else needs to agree to that. But I would be agreeable to what Greg suggested, is to have some SARS training.
Okay. One way of perhaps getting at that would be to offer an amendment to add to the recommended discipline, a SARS course of whatever duration whoever would like to offer an amendment would make, and then we would vote on the amendment for that first, and then the overall amended recommendation, assuming that amendment passes. So Greg or Larry, would either of y'all like to offer an amendment to the recommended discipline relative to the SARS course?
So do we need to include my suggestion on the wording on that paragraph 2?
Well, I think on the wording of the paragraph 2, Maria's going to clean that up, but what we're really voting on is the recommended discipline matter.
So I would make a motion that we include as part of the remediation that this person or complete a SARS course related to SARS engagements.
Larry, okay, is there any date by which you believe that should be completed, and any, like 2-hour course, or any, to give a little more specific there?
What do you think, Greg?
I would suggest a minimum of 4 hours, maybe with a June 30 date.
I'm fine with that. I'll amend my motion to that, include that.
Okay, so the amendment is to add as an imposition of discipline the need for the respondent to complete a 4-hour in duration course on SARS by June 30, 2021. So that's your motion, and Greg, I'm assuming you're seconding that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's the amendment that's on the floor. So all we're voting on is this amendment right now to add the SARS course as a requirement of the recommended discipline. So we'll take comment and discussion on the amendment first, and then we'll ultimately go back to the main recommendation. And hearing no further discussion on the amendment.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, is 4 hours consistent with our usual CPE or ethics add-on?
Just real quick, this is Maria. I was going to ask, Wendy or Sherry, can you all help me out here? What's language that we've used in the past? I know we've done SARS course, but I think there's specific language around that. Is that different from the Nasba 3-part ethics course? It's like
Maria, it is different. Do you need any help now? I can help you with it afterwards.
Okay. Todd, there is like a standard course. I'm glad you brought that up, that we have recommended in the past. I can be sure to include that in the consent order and the legal report.
So they're not recommending the standard ethics course. They're recommending a course in
the SARS.
The SARS, right? So it's a different course, and they're asking for 4 hours. And Todd, I would say that this is consistent. I would say 4 to 8 hours would be consistent with what we've requested in the past.
Just to add, Maria, that would specifically be SARS 21.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on the amendment first, which relates to the SARS CPE requirement? Okay, so at this point, Karen, will you call the roll on the amendment? And all we're voting on right now is to add the 4-hour SARS course requirement to be completed by June 30th, 2021 to the recommended discipline. Once this amendment is voted on, then we'll go back to the main motion, which was the recommended discipline, now to include the amended CPE requirement if it passes in this vote. So Karen, will you please call the roll on the amendment?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
A. Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Thank you, Karen. So that amendment passes. And so now we go back to the main motion now as amended, which would be to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,750, $1,000 for the independence violation and $750 for the peer review and firm permit violation, and inclusive of the requirement for the respondent to complete a 4-hour in duration course on the SARS before June 30, 2021. So that is now the amended motion that is up for discussion and vote. Is there any further comment or discussion on the motion as amended?
So, Chairman, the wording change that I suggested is, at what point do we discuss that?
Is that the one where we're going to change the language up above about another area of consideration?
Yes.
To change that? I think that on that one, we're only voting on the recommended discipline. We're not really voting on the text of the preamble, but I think Maria has indicated that she will modify that language, the final legal report. So in my view, I'm not sure that there's a separate vote that is necessary on that language modification because it's outside of the recommendation.
Well, I just want to make sure that everybody else agreed with what I said. I mean, I don't want her to go on just what I'm saying. I'd like to,
understood.
So the two things I was suggesting is to remove the phrase "another area of consideration is that," and just start the sentence that says "the respondent," and then remove the word "only." But I want everybody else to be okay with that.
I'm okay with it. I think that's a good suggestion, Larry.
Any other comment on that? I see some heads nodding and thumbs up. And Maria, are you comfortable that you have the suggested edits there?
Yes, thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Larry. So I think we're ready to vote on the amended disciplinary recommendation on this one. Any further comment or discussion?
I have a comment on the amended recommendation. It's minor, but should that be a comma or a colon after that 1750 so that it doesn't look like that's 1750 and 1,000 and 750?
Yeah, I thought about that too, Janet, but I didn't bring it up.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I can put that in parentheses if that is better for you all.
Yeah, it was just kind of confusing. Yeah, it could be. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So we'll make sure that that's a parenthetical so that it's emphasizing the detail of the primary $1,750 civil penalty that's proposed. Thank you, Janet. Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, so now we're back to the main motion, and Karen, will you please call the roll on the amended motion?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Clary Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Jay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Weatherby,
Judy, we couldn't quite hear you on that one. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you, Judy.
I have to unmute in two places. I don't know what that's about, but.
Okay, thank you, Judy. I'm kind of looking back. So we've dealt with the recommendation on item 11, and I may need some of y'all's help. I'm not sure how clearly we've dealt with the recommendations on 8, 9, and 10, which I think were also part of the original motion. But what I would ask to just make sure that we don't leave any uncertainty is that we go ahead and vote on the recommendations as proposed for 8, 9, and 10. Be clear that the board has actually approved those recommendations.
I so move.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? My apologies. I think I crossed this up and could easily have included that with the 11, but I did not overtly do that. Karen, will you call the roll on accepting the disciplinary recommendations for cases as presented 8, 9, and 10?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Jay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and board, thank you for your forbearance with me for having to two-step that one here. My apologies for that. Andy, turn it back over to you for the representations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two representations. Case number 12 is the respondent was disciplined by SEC. Consent order requiring respondent to appear before the board before reactivation of license. Respondent voluntarily closed the license in November 2020. And here we're just authorize a consent order requiring respondent to appear before the board prior to reinstatement with the CPA license is a recommendation. And then number 13, we had some discussion on number 13. It deals with the unlicensed activity peer review violation, holding out as a licensee. There was a proposed reduction of the civil penalty to $2,000. From my notes yesterday, we still in the body on page 12, this not the last sentence, but the sentence before that, we had talked about taking out the parentheses, the $1,000 for each attestation submitted without a firm permit. And that is still in our final draft this morning. So I would ask that that be removed in the text there, so that be stricken from the text on page 12.
Thank you, Andy. This is Maria real quick. Sorry about that. Whenever I was whenever you all said that yesterday, I thought we were referencing the consent order, but now I see what you're talking about. So I'll make sure to take that out before I finalize the legal report.
Okay. And then it was brought, the other thing that's kind of brought to the attention was, well, under the recommendation, we had recommended that to authorize a penalty of $2,000 as agreed with the respondent. But also, there has been a suggestion this morning that we had that the legal team review the website to ensure that they have appropriately removed any references to CPA or accounting.
You're saying in the new recommendation, Andy?
Yes, that's for somebody to consider here. So what I'm going to do is, since this was approved by the committee yesterday, I'm going to go ahead and lift up the two re-representations on 12 and 13 and present them as approved by the committee and ask for approval. And then if from that, then I think the appropriate thing for me to do is at that point, then we can have a question and then amend that since I can't, on behalf of the committee, I can't do that unless the committee were to reconvene again, but we would do it as a board that we would change that if we so wanted to. But that was a recommendation this morning that we add that to it. So, Mr. Chairman, I lift up re-representations 12 and 13 for approval as approved by the committee. You're on mute. You're still on mute, Kevin.
Sorry about that, Andy. So what we'll do is we'll accept a motion to approve the recommendations from the committee and a second. And if we get those, then we'll open it up for discussion and can amend the disciplinary recommendations as the board sees fit. Is there a motion?
I would make a motion that we add to number 13 that the legal team would review this website to ensure that that anything that was not appropriate was removed from the website, accounting, CPA, so that we don't have any issues with the website.
Andy, this is Maria. Real quick, a point to that. We can certainly do that, and the respondent will sign the consent order, and then it comes to legal and then to Wendy for signature. Because this isn't something that is a responsibility of the respondent to check, I don't think we have to put it in the recommendation or amend the recommendation, but I can certainly make a note to do that before I accept the consent order. It's just implied that they wouldn't be in violation of our law and rules. And we wouldn't accept, a final agreement if they were. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I don't think we have to amend the recommendation, but I can certainly make a note to, triple check before we move forward.
So Maria, you're saying that it would be included on the consent order, right?
I'm sorry, Larry, can you repeat that?
You're saying that removal of all those references would be a part of the consent order that he would sign, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Andy, does your motion also need to include that Maria would correct the new information about the breakdown of the fee, or is that just something that we're going to do?
It would not be to break down the fee. It would just be an agreed upon $2,000 fee.
Oh, I mean, does that motion need to include that she would fix that?
I don't believe that it does, in that it's not a part of the recommendation that we are voting to approve or disapprove.
Okay.
So that's really an editorial comment that they can, and she has indicated she will make that edit.
Okay.
So given Maria's background on how things would work in terms of accepting the finality and with finality, the consent order, Andy, are you now comfortable putting forth the recommendations as presented by the committee?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that in the form of a motion for cases 12 and 13. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the recommended disciplinary measures for cases 12 and 13?
I have one more quick question. In the new recommendation, does it have to include that there would be the signing of the consent order in there, or is that already included up above? In other words, the new recommendation just says what the penalty would be as agreed to, but it doesn't say that he still has to sign a consent order.
Maria, we'll look to your guidance on that one.
Sure, I can add the authorize the consent order requiring respondent to pay the $2,000 civil penalty. Sometimes just because on these new recommendations, we just assume that the carryover from, the consent
Yeah.
order was already proposed and that kind of thing, but I'll certainly change that to clarify.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Any further comment or discussion? If not, Karen, will you call the roll? And again, this is on approving the recommended discipline for cases 12 and 13 in the representations.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Kay Moon,
Aye.
Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That motion passes. Larry, or excuse me, Andy, are there any other further items from the Enforcement Committee to report out?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. We just want to thank our staff and our attorneys and our investigator for all the hard work that they do, and the committee members for all the work that they put in to bring the enforcement report to the board each time. So we appreciate all they do.
Thank you, Andy. And again, similar to the licensing committee's work, much of the heavy lifting and discussion on a case-by-case basis was painstakingly done by the committee in yesterday's public meetings, and so we appreciate that. One just kind of overall observation on our disciplinary report. If you were to compare the number of cases in this month's or this quarter's report with what we've been dealing with in prior years, you would note that they've gone down by quite a number of cases. And in part of that, it's due to the fact that we have fewer CPE non-compliance cases due to the policy changes that the board has made, which is a great thing. Our compliance rates are moving in the right direction. And if I had to kind of put my finger on the two remaining disciplinary issues that give our practitioners the most fits and land them in trouble, one is not doing this Tennessee state-specific ethics requirement. The board, in its agreement with the TSCPA, have made it easier than ever to get those credits via online courses if one chooses. So encourage all our practitioners to do that. And then the other, probably most frequent and nettlesome violation relates to issuing review reports, particularly for the contractors board, without a firm permit and or without a peer review. So again, we just encourage our practitioners to pay attention to those requirements, and maybe we can whittle down future disciplinary reports even more. With that, we'll move to the Laws and Rules Committee. And Larry, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Mr. Chairman, our committee only had one item yesterday in the committee, at the committee level, related to Maria giving us an update on a rule change related to requirement of an ethics class for reinstatements and short-term renewals and so forth. So I'll turn that back over to Maria again today if she wants to say anything further about that.
Thank you, Larry. Yes, so just to recap, yesterday we talked about the ethics rule change, and right now we anticipate having a rulemaking hearing at the May meeting where we will, have the opportunity for the public to comment on that rule. I'm not anticipating any pushback on that at this time. We've received internal approval, and then it went to the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office. So the next step is rulemaking hearing, and that is all I have.
Okay, thank you, Maria, and also thank you, Larry. Appreciate the report out from your committee.
Okay, Wendy's either waving at us or wants to speak. So
okay.
I have a quick question. I don't think anyone on this board has gone through the rulemaking hearing process. We've taken the proposed rule route in the past several years. And so, Maria, can you tell me, when we conduct this rulemaking hearing in May, then at what period would the rule become effective, given that everything goes smoothly with the rulemaking hearing?
Yes, so that is hard to gauge just because after the rulemaking hearing takes place in May, it has to be resubmitted to the Attorney General's office. And so sometimes, that can take a week, and sometimes that review can take, a month or two, depending on who is reviewing. So it's kind of contingent on other people approving. And then from that time, you file with the Secretary of State. I think the notice is I think it's 90 days from filing with the Secretary of State's office. It becomes effective, and the process is the same, and that it has to go before the Joint Government Operations Committee as well. But so just to recap and clarify that. So what will happen is the rulemaking process will take place. Then it has to go through the Attorney General's office again for review. Then I believe the governor's office just does a check on it as well. And then it can be filed with the Secretary of State. 90 days from filing with the Secretary of State, that rule becomes effective, pending approval from the Joint Government Operations Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Quite a process. So, Wendy, thank you for clarifying that. With respect to the executive committee report, it primarily consisted of reviewing the board's financial activities year to date in the fiscal year that we're in comparison to prior years. And Wendy, any further comments that you want to add with respect to that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further comments on that. Would you like me to run through it, or does anyone have any questions that maybe came up since yesterday?
I don't see a need to rerun through it since it was run through in committee fully, but if there are any questions, please go ahead and pitch them in. Okay, I think that takes care of that. We're moving, I think, along in good shape time-wise. Are board members comfortable going ahead and proceeding to the next item on the agenda, remote testing, which will kind of be an update on where Nasba is proposing to go there and trying to solicit feedback on the part of board members with respect to that. We'll go ahead and proceed then with the remote testing discussion. And Wendy, I'll turn it over to you here.
Great, thank you. Just kind of before I get into this, there have been, I think, 3 total webcasts related to remote testing that Nasba has sponsored over the past several months. So can I get a sense from the board members, how many have been able to participate in at least one of those? Can you kind of raise your hand? Okay. So most of you, I think maybe there's a couple that haven't. Judy, have you been able to participate? I think you had told me yes. You're muted if you're trying to talk.
I'm sorry. I think
I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, I think
okay.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was during COVID, so that was during COVID, so I was like trying to remember if I really did or if I just think I did. Anyway.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
Anytime Judy can't remember anything from now on, she's going to blame it on COVID.
Okay, so my plan today was to do a recap of this project, why we're here, how it's going to work, and what the ask of the board is really at this point. So I will, since most of you have had a chance to see a pretty lengthy presentation of this, I will keep it rather brief. But feel free to ask questions if something comes up, and we can chat about this at the end. So really what's happening in the CPA profession is a discussion about taking the exam to remote. So this is a remote testing project, I guess is the best way, or initiative that has taken shape where AICPA and Nasba are looking into the feasibility of effectively delivering the CPA exam remotely. And so why has this come up for discussion? Well, as you might expect, the pandemic has caused some concerns. Test centers had to shut down for 30 days, and that causes, angst amongst the exam candidates and gives us pipeline concerns. And so really, as soon as test centers closed down, the AICPA started looking, and Nasba started looking into an alternate delivery method that maybe we could use in the future should test centers lock down again, or another type of an emergency that might happen. And so we're going on almost a year of them looking into this. Another few reasons why pipeline considerations: we want exam candidates to continue to test. We don't want them to get defeated in their attempts to become a CPA. And so hopeful that something like this would help them in their process. The future of testing. The pandemic has really shed light on technology and the ways we can use technology. And is this feasible for the profession to use going forward for the CPA exam? I think everyone feels like it's something we need to look into, rather maybe not on a normal basis, but for emergency purposes and the like. There are also uncontrollable factors out there. So sometimes you have executive orders, you have legislation that kind of keeps your hands tied as far as what you can do related to the exam. So for example, I believe Colleen mentioned last week that there are executive orders and legislation out there that during the pandemic maybe required boards to issue licenses to essential service type providers minus the exam, and allowing them to take the exam later. And we probably don't want to end up in a situation where there's legislation that requires us to give it a license to a CPA without them taking the exam. And so the thought of making sure that the exam is available is important to look at. So that's kind of the why behind remote testing. And so a summary of how it would work would be, we would have standard eligibility. So the same process now where you meet the requirements to sit and you're approved by Nasba or the board in order to take the exam would still exist as it does now. A candidate would test in their home, or they would test at another location, maybe an office environment. It has to be somewhere with 4 walls and a door, so you can't go out to a park and take the CPA exam. So there are many factors involved in where you can, or where would be an acceptable place to take the exam. Candidates would use their own computer, their own monitor, their own camera, their own Wi-Fi, and they must meet minimum requirements that they could certainly test in advance of taking the exam. And all of those requirements have gone through a legal review by the AICPA and have been approved by their legal team. The remote exam would use the same software as the test centers currently used. It would just be delivered in a cloud-based manner. The candidate would walk through some initial steps of doing an image of themselves, checking their ID, going through a checklist of items to make sure they meet all the requirements to take the exam in a remote area. Once they are done with that initial walkthrough, then a readiness agent from Prometric would jump in and walk through a more specific 360-degree review of their environment. Cameras would review the entire area. If you look at Chairman Monroe right now, there's too much going on in his room, in his office there. He wouldn't meet requirements to test for the exam. So there are, as many of you have seen in these presentations, some pretty strict requirements on what your environment has to look like in order to allow you to test. So you have this readiness agent that walks you through this checklist or this candidate check. The candidate then proceeds to a pro-proctor for the exam itself. And this is the person with Prometric that watches you the entire time you're taking the test. So similar to, excuse me, the testing environment, someone is watching you while you're taking the exam in your remote environment. And so we understand that these pro-proctor folks will have will have roughly 8 screens that they are responsible for observing during the session. If concerns are noted by this agent, they can bring in a security agent to also review and engage in what's happening in the testing environment. The software and exam content are securely deployed from the cloud, and exam answers securely transmitted back to the AICPA. The candidate's computer is locked down during the process. And so the only thing they can use on their computer when they're testing is the information that is being received from the cloud in order to take the test. Zero of content resides or remains on the candidate's computer. So it is accessed from the cloud and doesn't actually reside on their computer. Psychometrically, this has been approved and legally approved from a software and process standpoint from those at AICPA and Nasba. So from a security standpoint, this seems to be where most of the questions come from those across the country when it comes to remote testing, is what is the security? You know, can this be hacked? Can you cheat? So there's all sorts of concerns from that angle. What we have been told is that there are limited versions of the exam that will be used for remote testing and remote testing only. So you may see content that you wouldn't see on the regular exam, although it is considered the same exam from what we've been told. The candidate is monitored and videotaped the entire time they are testing. Prometric has the ability to stop the exam, investigate the candidate, and or abort the exam at any time should they suspect or have information that some security risk has happened. Candidate videos can be reviewed during or after the test, so those are maintained. And again, the candidate's computer is locked down so that only allowed software can be accessed related to the exam. So what are the next steps in this project? So what we are being asked, or what boards are being asked, is it is being suggested that they run through a pilot of this. So it's hard to know how confident we are that this is going to work without going through a test or a pilot. As the AICPA reiterates, we need to test the lifeboat. Is the lifeboat going to work that we suggest that we use during emergency situations? So what they plan to do in this pilot is test the process, test in small groups for us to get feedback on how this is going to work. The proposed date now is to be determined. They had hoped to do this in March and April, but they felt that that is too rushed. They're going to have to back it up a little bit. So it looks like it will be sometime in the second quarter of 2021. They're looking to test or to have 250 to 1,000 sections during the pilot process. There will be no first-time test takers, no retesting of a failed section within a quarter. There will be domestic candidates only, no international folks. All exam sections will be allowed during the pilot. The psychometricians who have been evaluating this are highly recommending this pilot. And they have deemed that this exam is the same as taking it at a Prometric testing center. The idea is that after the pilot, we can gather feedback, gather information, and then report back to boards on what was found during the pilot process. What's going to happen after the pilot? Well, they still need to define what an emergency is. When would we deploy remote testing? Would it be if Prometric centers are closed down again? What could happen internationally where this could be used? Is that a consideration or not? Is this just going to be something that occurs domestically? There are also ADA test accommodations. Those are not going to be, there are still questions out there for ADA accommodations, and those have not been worked out and will not be part of the pilot. So those still need to be worked through. And of course, remote testing of the international candidates not in the US is not part of the pilot and has to be considered going forward. So what I'd like to do is I would like to maybe open the floor to some comments on how board members feel about this. It is something that you are interested in approving the scores in our state to be accepted for us to participate in the pilot, or accept scores from the pilot, either from our own candidates or from those in another jurisdiction that may wish to transfer here at some point in the future. We may or may not, even if you all were to approve us to participate in the pilot, they may or may not use our candidates. We do allow international folks to test in our jurisdiction, and that may rule us out. I'm not positive. I haven't received a direct answer on that yet, but we would still want to communicate whether Tennessee would accept scores from those outside of the state should they transfer here. So Andy or Mr. Chairman, do you all feel like I've covered that pretty well to open the floor for comments?
Yes, I think that's a good overview. Andy, do you feel similarly?
Yeah, I feel like she hit on everything. I would like to add that we had a detailed conversation about this on the board of directors in January when we last met, and Nasba still firmly stands with the commitment to state boards that it will not approve the use of remote testing until satisfactory answers to concerns and issues are adequately addressed. So this is nothing more than to have a pilot, to look at the results, to actually compare to see if there was a higher percentage of passing on the first time than what is normally done, and just to analyze the results and then come back to the board and the state boards and offer a recommendation. So this is nothing more but just a test to see if it would work and what the concerns are, because we have really the whole point is we've had 3 meetings on this and we've broken everything down. We've had a lot of questions concerning it, even to the point that we brought up some of those questions at the board meeting. So there's a lot of uncertainty about it, but we've got to test it to see if it's practical, just to make sure. And so that's what the request is about. And I think Wendy did an excellent job covering it.
Thanks, Andy. I just would welcome any board member input. It looks like the ask of boards from NASBA is whether at this point we would accept scores, exam scores from participants who participated in the pilot that might ultimately be applying for a license in Tennessee. Any thoughts or comments from board members on that?
I got to do the first webinar, but I didn't get to do the second one. But I can't remember, how did they verify the identification of the candidate prior to sitting for the exam? That everything else seemed to be great, but I can't remember how they verified identification.
My understanding is that they do it via, they take an image of you during the readiness check, and then you also will hold up your ID and they will capture that, your ID, and match that to you as, I guess, similar to what they would do in the Prometric Test Center.
But the potential for having a fake identification, I mean, if I'm just holding something up to the screen, have they determined any way that they can verify that is a legitimate photo identification?
Gay, I'm not sure I've heard anything specific to that. I'm not sure they do anything in the Prometric Test Center any different than look at the ID. So I don't know if they have any advanced ways in the Prometric Center to determine whether it's a legitimate ID or not.
Okay, thank you.
Can I speak a little bit about what CBT has discussed? The committee I'm on, the computer-based testing, has discussed this at length. And I think it's fair to say when we started this discussion last year that there was quite a bit of skepticism. I was skeptical, of course, about security, but also about the ADA considerations, just because I've dealt with this, in a school situation, and you don't have an alternative. You've got to deal with that. And my students who maybe go and take summer courses at other larger schools who test under this situation have had concerns as ADA students because their computers locked down and they couldn't access something that I don't even know what exactly they're referring to, but some special considerations that they're entitled to. Taking a bathroom break became a problem. The thing is, and then of course, when do you do it? And if one state does it, one state has an emergency, do we accept it? But as we've gone along, and you probably sensed this in the webinar Thursday, I think the need for it has become very obvious to the AICPA and Nasba. So as Andy says, it's just a pilot, but if you listen to what they're telling us, they really think we need to move in this direction. And I think there's just a fear that COVID and other things will be barriers that could impact the profession. So I've become convinced that these are just things we have to work out. And Wendy, they're asking that each state have participants in that pilot, and the pilot will count as their CPA score. It's not just a trial by friends of the profession or members of boards. It's actually a pilot of people for whom the exam will count. So we're pretty far down the road. I guess that's the sense that I'm getting, is a lot of people want to see this happen, sort of to protect the profession. That's the message I get. I could speak to any skepticism that people have because, I've been there. But I was comforted by what the Prometrics representative said Thursday, as far as how many thousands of remote tests they have administered. So they do have experience in this, and other professions are further down the road, although not a lot of professions as big as ours and important as ours. Not important, that sounds snobbish, but as pervasive, for whom the test is such a significant factor to the public. I don't know how many comparable ones there are. Some law ones have gone remote, I understand. But anyway, that's where I am in the thinking. I think we have to look at it real seriously.
Thanks, Pam. Any other comments or observations?
Is there anything?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Is there anything in our
It's my understanding.
Sorry, Greg. Go.
We'll give John the floor, and then we'll move to Greg.
Sorry, thank you. Is there anything in our law or rules that would prevent us from pursuing this now or in the future as it becomes more prevalent?
Hi, John. This is Maria. Sorry, I was muted. I've reviewed the law and rules, and it's pretty wide open that, we contract with a third party to do this. And so there's nothing specific saying that this would be prohibited. It's broad, and it would be allowed under our current law and rules.
One other item on that point, I guess it was the Thursday webinar that they had last week on this that I participated in as an observer, I think they did address that question, and basically their view at the time, they weren't going to make an absolute statement, but the Nasba representative had indicated, I believe, that from where they sat, based on their review of the various states' laws and regs, they didn't see any barriers with respect to this type of testing from that, and certainly none that were widespread across, multiple states. Greg, did you have a comment that you wanted to make earlier?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I have a lot of confidence in the folks who made the presentations in their teams, and specifically, I believe the AICPA and NASBA, as well as Prometric, have had cybersecurity folks look at this and tweak certain aspects of it. So I'm very comfortable with where they are. I started out initially, as Pam said, somewhat skeptical, but I've become convinced that it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Greg. Other comments or questions?
This is Todd. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
Andy and then Todd.
Okay. I've been cutting in and out, so if I cut out, I'll try to make this quick. When I was listening to Gay, I went out and I looked, and for the pilot, they're going to use candidates that are repeat experienced candidates. So number one, that they would already have information on that candidate that's there. Secondly, is they do have to have a government issued ID required, and it's reviewed against the notice to schedule, the same process that they use in the test centers. In this case, the candidates' photos are captured and retained with the test itself for at the test centers, and also will be done for remote testing too. Currently, they do use fingerprints at the test sites, but due to COVID, they're currently not using that. And that currently they don't have any plans to add fingerprints that are not captured because they're using remote testing, but that may come in the future. So those are the things that are required, which is the same exact requirements that are done at the actual test sites right now. So that kind of an update of what they're doing.
Thanks, Andy. Todd?
I like the concept of having contingency plans and a fallback, particularly after the last year. We've seen that a lot of things can get disrupted rather easily. I do think, though, that having a little more defined understanding of when remote testing would come in play is important. I think much like other things that have become convenient will become the expectation. And I think that would hold true here by the market. And so I think being prepared to confront that is important on the front end rather than when it comes.
Thank you, Todd. Other comments or views?
I will say, I think there are people who've studied this extensively in the AICPA, particularly, who are in favor of having this as an option, or at least considering it heavily as an option permanently, maybe not just for emergency. I don't think anyone is suggesting that right now, but that's what I hear. Andy, maybe you can speak to that more if you think that's the case. But we're not being asked to consider that now, but that's just what I heard some people say in these presentations to the committee was, if we've got it there and it's valid, then the way of the future may be to put it there. So I don't think we should ignore that fact as we go down this road, that may actually happen in the future.
Yeah, I don't think anything has been determined yet about what will happen. I would say that I've heard comments that say that if we turn it on for emergency purposes, more than likely we're going to have this from now on, and this will be the way it's tested. But currently, this is just a pilot for consideration and discussion. The way that they're trying to do the pilot is to get some information back so that when we actually have regionals meetings, that there will be a presentation and a presentation of the results. That was the intent, so that we could go ahead and talk about it and discuss it further. And so with that, I think there's a whole lot more information to come. And, as I said, Nasba has agreed to really go through this in detail and get back with each state board to see if there are concerns. And I can assure you the board is very much touching this and asking questions, and so are other boards across the nation. So it's definitely just for a pilot, and then from there, what will happen. Obviously, technology is changing. The fact that we're meeting in universities and schools, we have a whole generation of people that will be accustomed to taking tests online. So they're, just with that as knowledge, I do think the test will change eventually. At what point, I don't know. At what point, if we roll this out for emergency, for a lockdown and a closing of test centers, then all of a sudden we open it up, can we ever take it back? That's unknown. But all of that will be discussed after we get results back and determine if it is safe, and kind of analyze those results is what the pilot's for.
Thanks, Andy. Any other comments or thoughts?
Can I want to make sure I'm understanding. I think what I heard is that the people participating in this is not their first time to sit for any part, and their image has been captured at a Prometric center, and there is some comparison at the time that it's taking a test remotely to that image. Am I understanding that right?
I am not clear. You are correct in that these will not be first-time test takers, but I'm not sure it's during that exam whether they would be comparing the ID to a previous capture. I'm not clear on the answer to that.
In our white paper, page 12, in the second paragraph or second bullet point that was handed out, it says the government issued ID required and reviewed against the NTS, which is notice to schedule, the same process as in test centers. So it's my understanding that once a candidate has come into a test center and showed a photo ID, that same ID is the one that's on file that they compare it to. Now, it's not written there, but that's my understanding of it. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been told in the past. But it's not specifically in that white document.
Thank you.
Is there a sense among the board that we would be comfortable accepting test scores from this proposed pilot as legitimate scores for any candidates either that are from Tennessee or later choose to transfer in and apply for a license in Tennessee? Is there a comfort level with that?
I would think so, to the extent we want, a legitimate pilot test that with quality, some quality results and quality control and ability to really study that. We need good candidates to be able to sit for those parts during the trial. So it would seem a little bit inconsistent to say we want the results and are interested in the study that comes from it, but want to punish the candidates who are willing to raise their hand and try it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Todd. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I have a lot of confidence in the folks that are putting this program together at Nasba and also AICPA. And, you know, from going, I think I went or participated in both seminars, webinars, read the white paper, so forth. And I think it would be prudent for us to proceed and participate if they want to use our candidates to do so, because by participating we get a better ability to have input on future recommendations and so forth. If we exclude our candidates on the test on the pilot program, then we exclude ourselves from being able to make suggestions as it goes along. So I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Larry. Other comments? Are there any who object to indicating back to Nasba? What Nasba indicated, I think, in the Thursday meeting is that they would be querying at least executive directors and maybe board chairs as to their appetite for participating in the pilot and certainly for accepting test scores of participants, of candidates who do. Are there any board members who are uncomfortable with that notion? You know, just kind of hearing the comments, I'm hearing that we've got a pretty strong consensus that we're willing to accept pilot participant scores, whether they be candidates sitting in Tennessee or candidates who later would transfer and apply for a license in Tennessee, and that we're comfortable conveying that to Nasba when they put the query out to Wendy. Just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. I don't know that we need a formal vote on it. In this particular case, Maria has indicated that we don't need any law or reg changes here to accommodate this. So it sounds like we've got a strong consensus. Is that right? Okay. All right, Wendy, do you have what you need here in terms of feedback to take back to NASBA when they put out their query here?
So I think all of you have probably been cutting out in and out like I have, but I completely missed. Did y'all vote or it was just a verbal, just consensus?
It was a consensus. If you believe that we need to take a formal vote, we can do that, Wendy.
I guess I'd like to get Maria's input. Maria, if I share with NASBA that our board would accept these scores, do you believe we need the board to vote on that?
Wendy, I don't think that we need a vote just because I said the law and rules is pretty broad into how we can accept the test. So I think moving forward as it stands is completely fine. I don't think a vote is necessary.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy, and thanks, Maria. And Wendy, I very much appreciate you teeing up the topic. This is one that we thought was important to bring to the board for discussion and review. And to all the board members who've had a chance so far to participate in one or more of the remote testing opportunities and webinars, thank you for doing that. Andy?
I just a question. If we don't vote on the pilot program to accept those scores, and then actually make it kind of an approval by the board, have we actually stated now that we will accept test scores, period? Since there's nothing in our bylaws that says that we couldn't, or our rules. And so it would seem logical that we would just go ahead and just actually vote and state that, you know, we're going to do this temporarily just to ensure that the system is safe and secure, and to get more information back from NASBA once the test pilot's over with, just to ensure that we haven't, you know, opened the door to say you can't keep somebody in the future from doing it because you've already allowed it and there was no objection. But that's just me listening and kind of wondering here out loud.
Andy, I will say, this is Maria again. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think in the alternative that if you all were strongly against accepting these scores, that would probably require a vote, just because that'd be within the board's, you know, discretion to say. Absolutely not, and that would need to be on record and voted on. If you're more comfortable with going ahead and voting, that's fine. I just don't think it's necessary in order to be valid. But however, if you all want to do that, that's in your discretion.
And Maria, you don't feel, as Andy pointed out, that if we accept the pilot test scores, that then we're obligated to continue to accept something, scores taken remotely. We would have to act against that, I suppose.
Yes, and I also think just with the way that it's been handled thus far, there would be notice and opportunity for the board to make, have discussion and make decisions about that. In the event that this is something they permanently want to do, we could certainly carve out maybe something in our law or amend our law to, really solidify that. But I don't think you'd be compelled or bound or, forced to do that just by accepting the pilot at this stage.
Okay. Thank you, Maria and Wendy, for that input, and Andy for that question. Based on what I've heard, I'm comfortable that we would not need an affirmative vote at this point on the pilot. And that the good news is that Nasba has made it very clear that they're not going to proceed beyond the pilot until they study the results of that and then have a pretty broad input seeking approach if they want to move beyond that to more of a permanent or even if it's under emergency circumstances only. So I'm comfortable that we'll get another bite at the apple here once we get through the pilot, if we need to. With that, we're moving along in pretty good shape. So what I'd like to recommend, unless someone is in need, is that we just go ahead and proceed through our NASBA updates and then finish out the meeting, and then we'll adjourn for the day prior without the need to take another break. Is that amenable to folks? By show of hands, folks pretty comfortable with that? Okay. We'll go ahead and go to our NASBA updates, and Andy, we'll turn things back over to you from a board of directors standpoint. And just thank you, Andy, for your enthusiastic participation on the NASBA board as our Southeast Regional representative. We get the benefit of that in Tennessee, but so do our neighboring boards as well. So we appreciate your leadership there. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. A lot of things we discussed at the board already, so I won't even mention those. I will say that NASBA in Nashville is fully operational. We got an update on that, that they're still working with strict social distancing. They've not only survived COVID-19, but the bombing, which caused a lot of issues, not only for us downtown, but also for them, since it was so close to the building. They have continued a restriction for non-essential travel that states that it's been suspended through June 30th, 2021. Or so that we talked a little bit about the virtual conferences, but that is for all their staff too. I know that last time or the time before in our board meeting, we had a conversation about the CGMA and what AICPA mailing out or promoting the CGMA designation. AICPA has agreed to refrain from promoting it for non-CPAs, and they've cut back on their advertisements and promotions. So we'll see that in our emails and in Tennessee. The board got a report about the financial condition of NASBA, and NASBA did a really good job of cutting costs and trimming, asking people to take cuts in pay and really kind of knocking down expenses. And so the financial statements were presented, and NASBA is actually going to make a profit during this time period from the regular operations and also on investment side. They did a really good job of locking in investments. So when rates plummeted, NASBA came out in really good shape. One of the interesting things, and I don't know if we'll hear about this in our regionals or annual, but our chairman, Barrera, is in the process of
planning a strategic plan for the next 5 years for accounting. They're taking appropriate steps now to put that together. The task force is expected to have their report ready to report back to us at the board in April 21. So there's a lot of things, about what the future of accounting is and evolution and testing, and they're actually coming up with a strategic plan to address that. Cpa Evolution, we touched about it here. It's on track. And you're going to have a session. If you come to the regional meeting, there's already a session on that to get an update of what the task force progress is. Right now, tentatively, there's on the regional virtual meeting, there's an update for testing, the pilot testing, the results from it. The ethics, Chairman Coulter Baker, there's some upcoming exposure drafts on Accounting Standards Board and ethics, and specifically on also with NOCLAR. So be on the lookout for that. There'll be some discussions, and the proposals are anticipated very soon. So that'll be an interesting item, and that also will be an update at our regional meeting. The Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensing, ARPL, has come out with a study. The study is going to be released at the end of this month. To my knowledge, I have not seen it yet. We got a draft copy of it, and it talks about licensing and the impact positively on wages for women and minorities. So we really are going to see, I may be off here. Did I blip out? Okay. All right, I think I'm back now. Okay. Okay. So I don't know if that came through, but the study actually showed a positive impact for licensing on wages of women and minorities for the ARPL group that it represents. So they're going to release that and talk about it. They're actually going to have a follow-up study to the effects during COVID. And also ARPL is going to get together with state societies and also boards to hand out information and also to establish chapters at a state level to help get information out to rulemaking bodies so that they will have the information necessary to support the licensing of those professions. One area that kind of Wendy talked about, the executive director for committee chair, Ken Absick, he is meeting monthly 1-hour virtual meetings with all the executive directors. And their first call in December had 34 jurisdictions on it. And the key is that during COVID and the communication's key. So we're trying to reach out to each one of the jurisdictions and ensure that their voices are heard. And we're getting some really good comments back for that. I've been absolutely surprised at how much information and how much everybody's on the same page. And I don't know if Wendy would like to add something there, but it really seems, based on my view, when we were updated in January, that was really working well.
Those sessions have been tremendous. We should have started it a long time ago, even before COVID, but it's just great to have a chance to connect with our counterparts across the country. And there's a loose agenda of things to talk about, but it's pretty casual and just gives us a chance to bring something up if we're dealing with an issue. So it's been great.
Excellent, excellent. And it's been loose on purpose, according to Ken. He says he just wants to make it a coffee hour. How's everybody doing? So the other thing is that our vice chair, Michael Fritz, is starting to put together committees. He's going to have a meeting, his first pre-planning meeting in February. So as we get closer to May and June, please watch out for that. If you want to be on a committee, you'll be getting some information. Tennessee's always been a volunteer state. With Nasba, we've had so many board members that have been volunteers and active, and it's just amazing what the board has done in Tennessee, and it's great that we're all kind of participating with that and joining that also. And we do have a lot of people on the board that are very active. On a sad note and a happy note, I don't know if you've been to a board meeting or to a NASBA meeting, you've always noticed up front that that Louise Haberman has always been on the front row taking notes. She's kind of a staple at all the meetings that we have from the board. She sits in on every meeting for any call-in meeting. So she is going to retire in February, and that's we're really going to miss her. She is so talented and at what she does, and she has been with NASBA for a long time, and we just appreciate everything she's done. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Appreciate that report out, and especially appreciate your service on the national board as our Southeast region representative. In terms of NASBA committee updates, I know, Pam, you mentioned a little bit about CBT. Is there anything additional that you'd like to add?
Well, CBT has had two big issues. The remote testing, and we've covered that pretty thoroughly. And then the COVID extensions and various accommodations. And I did go back and reread notes about that. As of December, we were simply talking about that certain states have had to have more extensions because particularly larger states had to put restrictions on the seating capacity at prometric centers. They have to comply with the rules in place for each area. So, you know, there were questions about, so how are other states going to accept that? Wendy, they did note, they emphasized that each individual case would have to be considered separately, and they would leave that to the states. But they did say they were monitoring that. Are you reporting that to them, or is there some process for that?
So you cut out on me a little bit, Pam. I'm sorry. So are you asking if I am reporting
the COVID extensions, the exceptions?
So the individual ones that we've done at prior meetings, I have reported to our contact, our coordinator there, so that she can update the system, and then I will update them on your blanket extension so that they can both update the website and address the candidate specifically.
Right, and I didn't know, Andy, you had addressed this a little bit, but from what they told us, that's where they were. I didn't know if that was for the purpose of possibly building to some blanket extension in the future, but there was no statement that that was the case. So, Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd say that when we get to April, we might get some more information on that, but there's no update there that I have to add to that.
All right, the other thing is the transition task force moving into the Cpa Evolution. It sounds like so long from now, January 1st, 2024, but it's not. And so there's been a lot of debate and shifts in thinking. We're not supposed to talk about, you know, any of the specific issues and how the discussions have gone. But I will say the discussions have focused on what are we going to allow people, how do you count the old parts for the new parts? How do you get people, you know, who are straddling both? How do you get them into that system? And then there's just the administrative part about how do you make sure, you know, who's going to take what. So how many people are going to take each of the disciplines, et cetera. And then, of course, states have to deal with, will they have to change their regulations in any way? as part of this transition. So it's really a pretty complicated process. And those of us who've been around the profession for a while remember the transition when they went to computerized testing, for example. We've had more minor ones since then, but you know, anytime you do this, if you're going to change it significantly, there will be give and take. So stand by, and I don't know when they plan to come out with some report for discussion at large, but that's been a heated discussion. And the two groups, the two committees I'm on overlap and sometimes meet jointly, and I forget which committee's done what, but it's been very interesting.
Well, Pam, we appreciate your service on those committees and also the report back out as we progress here. So thank you. Janet, any updates with respect to the nominating committee or the examination review board?
Relative to the ERB, examination review board, we are currently finishing up field work for this year, and we'll expect to have reporting out at the regional meeting that occurs later this summer. And I expect to roll off that committee after this term. On the nominating committee, we've had one introductory remote, it's really by email, I suppose I should say. So I'm not sure when we expect to meet again. I don't have a schedule for that. So that's all I know on the committees that I'm on.
Okay, thank you, Janet.
Sure.
Judy, I think you're on audit committee, and Larry, my recollection is that you had or were rolling off of audit committee. Is that right?
Go ahead, Larry. I'll let you
Yes,
update.
yes.
I mean,
Yeah, I rolled off. I turned the audit committee over to Judy. She's in charge of that now. And I rolled over to, I'm now on the Uniform Accountancy Act committee, which had a flurry of activity before I rolled on there, but they've been kind of between meetings right now. So I don't have anything to report on that.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
And we have had on the audit committee, we had a call last Thursday mid-morning that lasted about an hour and a half or so. It was an introductory meeting. We did consider actually something that Larry brought up about the wording of audit procedure and what's covered in that. Larry, do you know what I'm talking about, where it includes the
You're talking about the agreed upon procedures?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. That's it. It's where, yeah, it's, and we had a nice discussion about it. I wish you had been on the call, because I think that you had a lot of input on that. I think you actually brought it up, but I do think we should make changes to that and look into that in detail a little more. In addition, we have, as Larry can speak to this, we have a busy schedule. I mean, we have like maybe 20, 25 meetings over the course, and it's all pretty much, video. But it's a busy committee. So I'm looking forward to it, though. I enjoy it.
Great, thank you, Judy. And also, Larry, thank you. Any other committee reports that I've overlooked here that we need to report out on from a Nasba perspective? Well, before we, yes, Andy?
Oh, I will say that we're going to have call meetings by region in February. And so the executive directors and also the chairs of each one of the state boards will be asked to participate. And just as an update to that, and also committee meetings will be coming up. So you may have some updates on committees that have not updated yet. And just, I failed to say that earlier, but that's scheduled. All
right, thanks, Andy. Before we get to old and new business, I guess this is both old and new business. We thought it was appropriate to spend just a few moments recognizing Brad Floyd for his many decades of contributions with respect to the Tennessee Society, and also Kara, who will be succeeding him in the society leadership. And for that, I guess I would start, Greg, by turning it over to you. I know that as a past division chair, you probably had some good experiences. John, I know you have as well, and Larry, I suspect you have as well, and others as well. And so I'll turn it over to you for some comments and maybe some good stories, if you can, on Brad's tenure here.
Thank you, Kevin. And Brad is retiring effective April 1st of this year. And he has served our profession, not just the PSCPA, but our profession for the past 44 years. So it has been a few decades, Kevin. But Brad is still a young man, so don't let the 44 years of service fool you. Though he is president and CEO of the PSCPA, he has worked extremely well, both with Nasba and this Board of Accountancy. And in Tennessee, we are very fortunate to have an excellent relationship between our Board of Accountancy and the society. I think that's not the situation in all states, as Wendy could probably attest to, but Brad has certainly engaged in fostering a strong relationship among our state board and the TSCPA. A little bit of history, I think, is informative. In 1996, Brad was appointed by the AICPA to serve on the Joint Committee on Regulation of the Profession. The committee, formed by AICPA and Nasba, was charged with developing a new regulatory framework to enhance interstate reciprocity and practice across state lines by CPAs. And one of the main aspects of that was to continue to protect the public interest. And on April 1st, 1998, in great part because of Brad's leadership, Tennessee became the first state in the nation to enact the major provisions of the Uniform Accountancy Act, including the concept of substantial equivalency, allowing CPAs greater mobility. Because of his contributions to the Joint Committee on Regulation of the Profession and his service to CPA State Society Executives Association, he was named to Accounting Today's list of top 100 most influential people in accounting in 1997. And as I mentioned earlier, Brad works diligently to maintain and enhance the relationship between the Tennessee Board of Accountancy and the Tennessee Societies of CPAs. How does that help us as a state board? Well, one of the things is that Brad invites Wendy to speak at our chapter meetings. We have 9 chapters, or the TSCPA has 9 chapters, and Wendy is, and Kevin, but I think primarily Wendy in this situation, Wendy is given the opportunity to present at least 1 chapter meeting per year for each of the chapters. So that's 9 touches that we have the forums for Wendy to give updates from the Board of Accountancy. In addition to that, through Brad's leadership, either Wendy or the chairman of the Board of Accountancy, Kevin, has spoken to the TSCPA council members. The TSCPA council consists of, I think, 75 to 100 leaders throughout our state, and it's a great forum for Kevin to present updates from the board, or for Wendy, or both, I think, sometimes. Also, Brad has worked really hard in helping the governor identify CPAs across the state who are equipped and willing to serve as members of the state board to protect the public interest. So I certainly wish Brad well in retirement. Hope he has a fulfilling retirement, and hope to do some things with him. I know he has a new grandchild, and he's enjoying Jack, his new grandson, and so he will have more time to do that.
Greg, thank you so much for those comments. And John or others, if you have any comments with respect to Brad, and we'll give you a little bit of a chance to respond, Brad, here if you feel compelled to. But we just wanted to make sure that you knew how much we valued the relationship. Greg, any comments? I know you've been a chapter president as well here, so I'm sorry, John.
Go ahead, Larry. You've got your hand up.
Okay. Yeah, that's enough of the good stuff, Brad. No, so now we're going to tell the truth. No, I met Brad Floyd in 1979. 89, whatever. What was the first year you came on, Brad? Anyway, it was 42 years ago. The first year that Brad was named executive director, the TSCPA convention was in Orlando at the Grand Cypress or something like that. And I was at the time the Knoxville chapter president. And so as president of the Knoxville chapter, I was attending the convention, sitting around the pool and of course it was during the break time for the convention, but I was sitting around the pool and this guy walks up and starts talking to me beside the pool, and turns out in the conversation that we figured out who each other were, and ever since then he's just been a great guy to know. Now the one downside is he's a graduate of the University of Florida, so he and Will Pugh have over the last umpteen years had a big discussion about Florida football versus Tennessee football, and so that was always a lot of fun. And he was always, Mr. Pugh he always had a handful of tickets in his pocket for football games, and I think Brad was the benefit of some of those UT Florida tickets that he may have had over the years. But Brad's just been such an influence on our profession in the state. There was never a time that I know that anyone ever called him for help that didn't get all the help they could use or need. And Brad, like Greg said, has formed such a great bond between TSCPA and the state board that is just invaluable. Now, having said all that, Kara's going to do a great job, but Kara knows she's got some big shoes to fill, and we all do, but we do welcome Kara as a great person to carry on his legacy. One other thing, I heard that you were in the running for the new UT football coach, Brad. I don't know if there's any, because I heard you were going to need a job, and I didn't know if you were interviewing for that or not, but I heard that rumor. But anyway, I'll get off and let some more people speak. But Brad, thank you so much for all you've done. We don't have time enough here to talk about all you've done, but thank you.
John, would you like to make any comments?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many years I've known Brad. I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 or so when I first met him, and have a long history of seeing him work in a number of meetings, a lot of traveling, both business and pleasure. You invited any type comment, Kevin, but I'm not going to go into the non-work related activities that maybe we participated in. You know, you said he's about to retire. I thought he retired 4 or 5 years ago, but I guess not. But I do think he officially retired on January 1st with the birth of his first grandchild, and I'm glad he's joined that club. Brad's done a great job leading TSCPA in terms of developing staff. Representing us on a national level has just been tremendous. Those of you who have participated in ASCPA Council know how highly esteemed the Tennessee Society is held, the profession in the state wide. And I think a lot of that is due to Brad's efforts and a lot of great staff members over the years too. I particularly remember, I'll never forget sitting in an orientation meeting at ASCPA Council. They break you into groups of states and discussed a variety of topics, and one came up, relationship between state boards and your state society, and some of these have you alluded to it, but I was kind of stunned when several of the states indicated, oh no, we have a very adversarial relationship with our state board, we don't get along. I mean, this was 15 years ago, but still it just kind of surprised me. And so I was surprised just because I always thought we had a great one, and now that I've been able to participate on both levels, state society and now state board. I think I've been able to witness a tremendous relationship that we do have between those two organizations, and I think a lot of that credit goes to Brad for his leadership and the involvement that he has fostered. Brad's not a CPA, but he values CPAs, and he's always valued the profession in Tennessee. He's worked diligently to help CPAs to be successful, but also as a dual role work towards the Tennessee State Board's goal of protecting the public interest. And I think that's a credit to his leadership. A couple of things that he also did was involved in individual mobility, firm mobility, and numerous other efforts. I think Brad's advocacy efforts have been very productive over the years and also very consistent. And I can always say, or will say for one, that I benefited from his leadership. I think all CPAs in Tennessee have benefited, the whole profession. Brad's made a great mark on the profession in Tennessee. And while we will miss you, Brad, we look forward to Kara's leadership. I know she'll do a great job. And I'm glad you'll be able to go back to your new full-time job as grandfather. And I hope it's a great role for you. So good luck.
Thank you so much, John. Brad, we'll give you the floor here for some rebuttal. These complimentary thoughts here. I'm surprised your head hasn't just expanded beyond the size of your Zoom screen.
That is, as some of you who know me well, it's very uncomfortable to hear such flattering remarks, because normally there's a rebuttal that sets the record straight. Larry, if you'll keep yourself on mute for just a moment, I want to thank everybody for all of your public service and your support of the profession. Working with the Board of Accountancy over the past 40 years has been a tremendous pleasure because of the great leadership we've had. Kevin, your role as chairman during the past year or 2 years, year and a half, has been tremendous. It's been a pleasure watching how skillfully you manage the meetings, and the board is well equipped to carry on its tremendous work during for the next term. We appreciate all that you guys do greatly. As was mentioned, the TSCPA is in good hands with Kara Fitzgerald. Larry tells me that's a tremendous step up, and it will be an improvement. And I agree with him for once on that. But I just want to say thanks for all your support. Tennessee's got a lot to be proud of, not just that new athletic director, John, that we have coming on board, but great things are going to happen within the Board of Accountancy and the Tennessee Society. The future is very bright there. But thanks for all your support. And finally, I want to thank Wendy and the board staff. Gosh, Karen, Sharon, and the rest of the team, we refer a lot of calls, a lot of problems, ask a lot of questions, and ask a lot of the board staff in between board meetings, and never cease to be pleased with the response and the accurate information and the help and the support that we get from the Board of Accountancy. The state of Tennessee has a lot to be proud of, and a lot of that credit goes to the strong leadership we have there at the helm. I've worked with, as you can well imagine, lots of boards and lots of staff members over the years, and I'm not saying it just because you guys are on the call, but we are in a great shape, and I'm very, very happy with what I leave behind. And thanks for all the comments, and don't be a stranger.
Thank you, Brad, and echo your comments with respect to Wendy, who also has a lot of experience at TSCPA, and Kara, just our thanks and congratulations in advance to you. We're looking forward to working with you together. And I can't begin to imagine how many hours the two of you have logged on either indirect in-person attendance at Tennessee State Board meetings or now via WebEx. It's been a lot, and that's not without sacrifice. So thanks to you both, and just wish you both, Brad, as you move into retirement and grandfathering types of activities, and Kara, as you move into your new leadership role, we could be more excited that the board of the TSCPA made an outstanding succession choice. And so we're proud of both of you. And thank you, Brad, for your efforts. And Kara, thank you in advance for your efforts.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
Judy?
I would just like to add just a thank you to Brad and his leadership. What he's done with Nasba and the TSCPA, and also with the ICPA and the relationship with the board. Just his outstanding communication skills that he has demonstrated over the 44 years and over the 35 years I've known him, and just his dedication to the profession. It's been said before, but just to say it again, he has really been an advocate for accounting in the state of Tennessee, and his ability to bring the society and the state together to work for common causes, and it's just been unbelievable. And we just appreciate everything he's done, and just really look forward to working with Kara also. Just a big thank you to both of them, and just excited for Brad and his retirement, but just excited for a friend that through the years have gotten to know, and hope that retirement he's truly blessed in it.
Thank you, Andy. Judy?
I'd just like to say that I know because of COVID, it's really, we haven't been able to get together, but as soon as we can do that, I would like to honor Brad and have like a dinner, after our Monday committee meetings, at my house, and, either grill or I've got a Blackstone grill now, so I can do the Japanese. I just am not good with the knife, so you have to steer clear. Anyway, I would like to do that once it is acceptable for us to have, like a get together. So on a Monday evening, and perhaps, Brad, I'll just reach out to you and we'll make sure it's a good time for you, if that's okay. And that'll give us something to celebrate.
It sure will. And Judy, thanks so much for that kind invitation, and look forward to that kind of a celebration. Pam?
I can't let us get away without thanking Brad for his emphasis on the students, because students are the future of this profession. And under Brad's guidance, the society has emphasized scholarships and educational programs, and there are always new innovative ways to bring the students into the chapter meetings and involved in the chapters. And I've seen that, oh my goodness, I guess about 40 years. So I really appreciate that. And I know all the other educators do as well.
Thank you, Pam. Any other comments from board members for Brad or for Kara?
So this is Janet. I'll just say congratulations, Brad and Kara. I think I've been running across you, Brad, ever since I've been a member of the Tennessee Society. So that's probably been at least 15 years, not as long as Larry and John, but it's been my pleasure. I've always appreciated your comments when we met, and with my daughter, I'll tell her you're retiring, and but hopefully our paths will cross again, and I'm sure yours and my path will cross again, Kara. So just congratulations and appreciate your service.
Thank you. Brad, thank you for just significant service, and it is appreciated. Gay?
Yes. Brad, congratulations on your retirement and this new grandchild. I know the next chapter in your life is going to be a happy one. And I wish you all the best, good health, and a lot of laughter for you. And thank you for what you have done for our profession. And Kara, I look forward. We've known you for a long time, and we are thrilled for you, and we're thrilled for our profession, and we look forward to working with you as well. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you, Gay. And again, thanks to both. And we look forward to that dinner invitation when pandemic conditions permit. And Judy, thank you in advance for your kind hospitality. The last item that we have on our agenda is old or new business. Is there any other old or new business that board members wish to bring before the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a thought, and maybe Wendy or Maria could research it, but this is really a follow-up on a comment you made earlier, Kevin, about the Contractors Licensing Board and the issues we have there. If we could convince the licensing board to require an accountant's peer review report to accompany the application, it seems to me that that might help some with the situation that we have.
Greg, that's a good suggestion, and I know that Wendy and staff have been in contact with the Contractors Board to try to figure out cooperatively how to work together to get ahead of the curve, rather than spanking some practitioner after the fact when they've made the boo-boo after they've issued the report and the toothpaste is out of the tube. Those are very good suggestions. And Wendy, I know that you've already had some interaction with the Contractors Board in ways to try to improve the processes.
We have looked at their application. We have made suggestions on how to better explain to the applicants and their accountants what's required of them. Greg, I'm not sure, but I believe that their requirements are set in statute, but I'll check into that to see if where that's located and if that's an area of improvement that could occur.
Thanks, Greg. Judy?
I was going to make exactly the same, not with the peer review report, but I was going to say, just like we got out ahead with the CPE of requiring them to at least list it or copy or whatever, which I believe has really saved our staff a lot of time, and I think it's gotten people into a mode of better adhering to the compliance requirements. So I am in agreement with Greg. I think we should do that. I think we should figure out some way. I don't know if there is something on the contract, if we can't require the peer review, but if it may be worded differently so that it's very clear that you just don't do this sort of thing off the cuff, that you have to you have to be licensed and have the appropriate credentials and reviews in order to be able to sign a report and get it. Because the biggest problem we have is people just doing it, and I think a lot of times it's just for a friend or someone they know or whatever. But I don't think that application where they have to read that, I don't think it communicates well. I don't know what it says, but it doesn't seem to. And perhaps maybe even if that department could require the accountant, the CPA, to sign on the application, because who knows if the actual application goes to that person. Because they're just providing a report. So if someone calls and asks them to do that, I don't know that they really see what all is required. Anyway, if there was a place for them to sign on that application, I think that would be helpful. And if we could just make sure the wording is very clear about the requirements, I think it saves a lot of time.
Thanks, Judy. We'll keep pushing the rock up the hill to see what we can do on the front end, Greg and Judy. Those are great suggestions, and we'll continue to work through staff with the Contractors Board and see if we can make some progress in cutting down our disciplinary load, because people are complying, whereas previously they may not have been. Any other old or new business to come before the board? I continue to believe that we are blessed with one of the best boards of accountancy in the entire United States. And I just appreciate everybody's dedicated efforts. I know it's been almost a year since we've been able to meet together in person, and I deeply regret that. Hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe and well. And just thank you so much. And for those that are practicing here, CPAs, just best of luck in busy season as we get through things. So thank you all and take good care. Meeting is adjourned.